Good evening. Welcome to today's class. Today I'm handling topic 6 of public procurement, and topic 6 is about procurement methods. So procurement methods for goods, services and works. So if you want to conduct procurement, which method is allowed in public procurement, and which methods are for goods, which methods are for services, and which methods are for works. You need to identify that. So apart from just understanding the method, understand which ones are specifically for goods, because some case studies will come to trick you. You will read a case study, understand the case study, and then when it comes to the application part, someone asks you, which method do you think is recommended for such a good, work, or a service? If not, you should be very clear to be able to identify methods that are specific for goods. Remember, there are some methods which are used when there is a combination of goods and services. So you need to really read through a method, understand it, and once you have understood it, you can be able to discern this method is for goods and services, this one is for intellectual services, this one is for works. You should be able to understand, because that is where the complication of the method comes in. Another thing is when you're supposed to use a certain method. We have around I think 13 methods of procurement, and all this procurement method, if it were simple enough, they could just say there is only one procurement method. Let's say open tendering. But because not every good, work or service can be able to fit in open tendering, there are certain special circumstances that will make one to use a different method of procurement from another. So why are they 13? Why is it that it's not one for goods, another one for services, another one for works? That is what you really need to understand. Why this method is there, which circumstances force a particular procuring entity to use this method and not this one. So you should understand the methods to an extent that you can compare one method with the other. If someone is to give you a case study, you should argue out and say, instead of restricted tendering method, I think request for quotation is the best method for this particular case. So you should understand them, not by just knowing them, but by being able to analyze each one of them. So before we go to the procurement method, we need to understand the threshold. Threshold is the maximum and minimum amounts of money or value set for a particular method of procurement. For you to use open tendering, and it's one of the differentiating factors in procurement methods, you need to know the maximum and minimum value of money that you should have for you to be able to use a certain procurement method. And most of these values are not really in this particular threshold. Most of these values, especially the maximum, is determined by the budget of that particular year. So it gives you a good imagination on which method to use when a certain value is involved. That's why a budget comes before a plan, so that you can be able to see what is in the budget before you should be able to plan for the method of procurement, because the method of procurement will be dictated by the value that has been attached to the particular procurement. So all these methods have a value attached to them, and that's what we call threshold. So if you read through the methods one by one, you should be able to know the minimum and the maximum that will be allowed for you to be able to use a particular method of procurement. After that, we go straight to the procurement methods, and I shall start with a very common one, open tendering. Open tendering is a method that is competitive in nature. and it allows everyone who can be able to meet the requirements or the qualification to apply for that particular tender. So what is unique about open tendering? You advertise it, it promotes competition, it is an open method, just as the term suggests, open tendering. It is very open to everyone, as long as you meet the qualification, as long as you can supply the products in the stipulated time, the budget that is there. So whatever makes it open, it is open to everyone. It allows competition. Advertisements are made. After advertisements, any willing tenderer, any willing prospective tenderer can be able to apply. Once you have applied, you go through the tender opening, tender evaluation, a contract is awarded, you are given the contract. So that is what is unique about open tendering. The dates, the timing, they are very critical in open tendering, but that is it about open tendering. And there are 4 types of open tendering. The international open tendering, it targets the international suppliers or contractors. The national open tendering, it targets the national contractors or suppliers. County open tendering, it targets that particular county. So it means if you are to apply for a county open tender, they will only consider the contractors or suppliers within that county. And then there is the special group specific open tender. That one targets these special groups in public procurement. In fact, the 30% targets the women, the youth, small, medium enterprises. Those are now the special groups in public procurement. So you use open tendering when the matrix or the threshold matrix allows you to use it. It is a competitive method. It requires a lot of time. So in case you don't have time or you need an item urgently, open tendering is not the method to use. So apart from open tendering, there is the 2-stage tendering method, where 2-stage tendering is a unique method that allows the evaluation committee to evaluate tenders in 2 stages. So the first stage is the technical evaluation, and then the second stage is the financial evaluation. So every tender that passes the technical evaluation stage, it is supposed to go to the financial evaluation stage. So why this method? Because there are some contracts that are technically important. The technical aspect of the contract is more important than the financial. So if that is the case, then the contract has to be taken through those 2 stages. The technical is done first. It is never the other way around. Technical is done first, and then financial is done next. After the 2-stage tendering, there is the design competition. If you're dealing with unique designs, things like architecture, planning, engineering, graphic, those unique designs, then you can use design competition. So you still compete against each other. It being design competition doesn't mean now you only consider one supplier. No, you bring those suppliers in that particular area and you let them compete against each other, and the winner will take the contract. So the only unique thing about this method, it is specific for design, unique design, or procurement of goods, works, and services that require design, or that design is the main element of consideration. We have number 4, restricted tendering. Restricted is there is just a little emphasis from the open tendering, in that you do not allow so many suppliers. In fact, with restricted tendering, suppliers are limited to the pre-qualification list. You remember registered suppliers and pre-qualified. Now, those are the ones you can use when you're dealing with restricted tendering. And why do you do that? Because of limited time of engaging so many suppliers. So you have to go to your list of pre-qualified suppliers and you let them compete against each other. Of course, it's not a one-man show where you go and pick one supplier from the pre-qualification list. No, it is restricted tendering. You still allow competition, but the competition is within the pre-qualified suppliers. That is what makes restricted tendering to be unique. Another method is direct procurement, a very challenging method where you only procure from one supplier. If there is only one supplier, if you're dealing with a monopolistic market, then direct procurement is good. If you're dealing with items that are very urgent and you do not have time to go through any other method of procurement, then you're allowed to use direct procurement. So those are the circumstances that will force you to use. So urgency, compatibility reasons. If you're dealing with a product where compatibility, or you're dealing with goods, work, or services where compatibility is critical, you cannot afford to use any other spare or any other product from another company because of compatibility or standardization reasons, then you're allowed to use direct procurement. So you have to prove that you're only dealing with one supplier in that supply market. Then you can be able to use direct procurement. There is request for proposal. Request for proposal is used when you're dealing with services or a combination of goods and services, advisory in nature, intellectual in nature. Then you ask prospective tenderers to offer their proposals. So proposal is where a service is involved. It could be a complete service or a combination of goods and service. But as long as a service is involved, then request for proposal is a very important method. Of course, it is a competitive method. Most of these procurement methods are competitive, maybe apart from direct procurement. So we are not using a particular method to avoid competition, no. It is just maybe for another reason, but competition still has to be present. Request for quotation is where you ask for prospective tenderers to send quotations, and they send these quotations to a specific number of registered suppliers, and then they will be able to quote their prices. So quotation method, and it helps a procuring entity to generate several quotations to be able to get the best price for their goods, works, or services. So it's a very interesting method. Quotations can be used if procurement of goods, works, or non-consultancy services that are readily available. Always remember these circumstances are very important, because someone will ask you, why should I use request for quotation and not open tendering? You should be able to know the difference between the methods. Number two, when there is an established market for the goods, work, or services to be procured, and then when the estimated value for the goods, works, or services are within the threshold for you to use the request for quotation. Low value procurement is used when you're procuring low value items. And another method we have here is force account, a method that is very common for government procurement, where you use the resources of a public entity to complete an entire procurement process. Maybe it is works that were left unattended to. So it means you have to borrow the resources or use the resources which were not budgeted for to be able to complete a particular project. And then we have a framework agreement, a process where you agree with 2 or more suppliers to be contracting them during particular seasons. So it means for you to use framework agreement, the quantities must be unknown and the duration must be unknown. You do not know the quantities to procure, and the duration is also unknown. So you select few suppliers, 2 to 3, and then decide, I will be using this one because I cannot estimate the quantities, I cannot estimate the timing. So you come up with 2 suppliers or 3, and you decide to give them contracts because of that unknown situation. So the quantity may be known, the delivery schedule may not be known, or both of them may not be known. So that is when you use framework agreement. And then we have community participation, where you let the community participate in a particular procurement of goods, works, or services. And most likely it happens in projects. When a project comes to a particular community, then you let them use this community participation. Let the resources come from the community. Let everything, the mobilization, come from the community, because you're engaging the community in public procurement. So by the time we are done with community procurement or community participation, we will be done with all the procurement methods. So if you take note of what I've just told you, understand why a particular procurement method is used. There is another method called reverse auction, another one electronic reverse auction. I think we shall be able to analyze them in details, because these methods are very detailed and very specific. You cannot just use a method because you feel like. You have to use it because of necessity. So thank you for that. We should be able to meet and agree, or rather analyze more on these methods of procurement.